Iowa State men's basketball is making the moves necessary to become a true blue blood. We're talking about today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today, we'll be talking about the moves that Iowa State is making to further themselves within this men's basketball community. Obviously, big name already, but we gotta keep things moving, right? And then we'll talk a little bit about something that TJ Otzelberger has mentioned a few times in the last few days in the second segment. Finally, we'll talk about the Iowa State men taking on Colorado in that third segment and how that game could go, what it could mean. Let's just jump right into the Purdue deal, though. This is pretty cool. I guess, yeah, it's right there on the side if you're watching on YouTube. Iowa State and Purdue have released, the announcement, I suppose, that they will begin a home-and-home series next season. What does this mean? Iowa State will go to West Lafayette, Mackey Arena, and take on Purdue next year. And then the year after, in 2026, Purdue will come to Ames, come to Hilton Coliseum, and take on the Cyclones. Now, some people might look at this and just say, all right, well, cool. Big deal. Whoop-de-doo. Okay. I disagree. I do think that this is a very cool opportunity, a very big deal for the Cyclones. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of things we got to cover. First thing that I think is important, we talked about this a little bit with like the Big Ten and the SEC doing those crossover games in football. This is not basketball that I'm talking about. This is reference. This is, they talked about doing this in football to basically strengthen each other's, arguments for making the tournament. And that's a whole argument for a whole different thing. If you want to talk about that, totally separate. Okay. But I can see where the parallels are here, and hopefully you can follow me. If Iowa State's taking on a quote unquote juggernaut in Purdue consistently, right? If we make this into a thing right now, I only see the 2 years, but this could become a bit of a thing, and maybe the conferences start to work together. And this isn't just Iowa State and Purdue. This is Big 12, Big 10 type of deal. Who knows? This could definitely bloom into something enormous. But right now, let's take it at face value and say Iowa State takes on Purdue and Purdue takes on Iowa State, and this becomes a thing. And then it's an opportunity for both these teams to look at this game in what would be a non-conference game and basically look at it and say, this is an opportunity for our team to improve our standing or our how the committee views us when it comes to tournament time. Okay, really, that's kind of what this comes down to. Because at the end of the day, neither of these teams are bubble teams as it stands right now. Okay, now let's not take anything for granted. Next year, there's a possibility. I don't want to say this, but just stick with me. There is a possibility Iowa State gets one win next year. Okay, extremely unlikely. Let's not overreact and just quote that and throw it to the newspapers, of course. What I'm saying here is that you never know what's in the future. So that being said, as it stands right now, Iowa State, Purdue, both very good teams, not really in that bubble, but seeding-wise. Okay, as we've mentioned, Iowa State maybe at that 3 seed right now with a win over Purdue. Where does that put you? I don't know for sure. I will say, obviously, Purdue, known kind of for being that team that chokes in the tournament. Not laughing at them, of course. Obviously, the loss to FDU, I think it was last year, and then St. Peter's, or not last year, it was 2 years ago to FDU and 3 years ago to St. Peter's in the Sweet 16, last year in the national championship. So what does that mean? This team is very high caliber, very solid basketball program in the Boilermakers. They also do that juicy wiggle thing, I think, which is kind of crazy. I know that I've seen some comments back and forth between Boilermakers and Cyclones, and it's a chicken and the egg kind of conversation. Who did it first? Because they have a different dance. Let's not get crazy. The Cyclones have the best juicy wiggle in the nation. Not sure who came first or what, but it doesn't matter. Cyclones do it better. And so, as far as actual conversion of great seasons, they have struggled in the past couple of years with those two big losses to a 16 and a 15 seed. As not favorites, but very good teams. That's going to stand out on the resume. But this team is right in there for Big Ten champions basically every single year. And this year, after they have lost their last two games, so that doesn't help. But they're currently sitting at third at 11-4. If they don't drop those last two games, they're tied with Michigan at the top of the Big Ten. This is a high-quality program here. So I think this is an absolutely big deal for the Cyclones to be able to play another high-quality program and show other teams, obviously in the Big 12, that's, hey, we're trailblazing here. Okay, take a look at how we're doing business, obviously. But this also elevates Iowa State into that, able to play with the top-tier talent. Obviously, the Maui Invitational this year went the way that it did. The Auburn game was tough, unfortunate, but it does give us a bit of a benchmark for where that team was at that point in the season. I like this, you got to have those games that are a little bit easier. Okay. Like let's be real here. I don't think that Iowa State's non-conference against like Jackson State, it's not the same caliber as Purdue. And I don't know what's the balance of those games, because you want to get momentum. You want to find out who you are as a team in that early slate. You don't want to get beat down every single game, but you also want to play quality competition. So it's one, on your resume, and two, you prove to your team that you can do it, right? You can do win those games, complete those tasks is kind of what I was trying to go with that. So you face an Auburn, you win, you lose on a tip in, right? That's whatever. Iowa, always going to be Iowa. But you face the number 5 Marquette this year. You get that win at home, 11 points. Looks great. And it helps the team morale. So I do think this Purdue thing, it's going to help in the short term, right? Like, how does this team, next year or the year after, how does the committee view it? How does the team respond to a game like that in an environment like that? Or you come here and we play this game in 2 years. I think it's great on that, side of things, but also it kind of is starting this snowball at the top of the hill, like a little bit of a yo-yo that doesn't come back, just goes down the hill. What happens now? Does Iowa State potentially start reaching out to more schools, or does this thing become a thing for the Big 12 where it's like, all right, we're going to start partnering up with these other leagues, as everyone just seems to think that the SEC is the greatest league in all of basketball right now? Wild take. Not sure why we're saying that, but either way, you want to do some cross games. You want to find out, you want to play that game. So I could see that being something that we do down the road. And if Iowa State's a pioneer kind of that trailblazer, that's great. I love that. Obviously, I'm all for more eyes getting on Iowa State basketball because it's great. It really is. And we've talked a little bit about, and I've seen the comments about this team performing a little bit better when they're not the quote unquote team to beat. And I agree with that. I definitely know where they're coming from. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier this year, but it was like the opposite of, I think this team can deal with that. I was maybe a little bit wrong. But more eyes on the program is always good. It's always a good thing. Okay. And if it becomes more consistent, then it's not that big a deal, right? You become one of those blue bloods, and it helps with recruiting. It helps with big game atmospheres. Not that Hilton isn't a big game atmosphere. It's arguably the best in the entire nation. And you and I both know that, but I'm just saying that this could be something bigger. Look down the road. As it stands right now, though, wonderful move. Purdue, great team to pick it against. Obviously, a very well-respected program. Good this year as well. We'll see what they do in the tournament, as they are kind of known for that tournament collapse. But look at last year, okay? And that UConn team was very, very good. Would have taken kind of the Avenger squad to take down the UConn going for that repeat. So, I don't know. Is this the absolute best team to face? In my opinion, almost yes. I don't know if I'm not going to dive into every other program possible, but there's a relationship between Painter and Otzelberger. He mentioned it in a presser. I think it was yesterday. I kind of talked about like, hey, been a great mentor to me. I think that both of these programs will benefit from this. And then, obviously, as far as standings goes, I don't think that, if Iowa State blows out Purdue, it's one thing. But if Iowa State wins on a tip, and I don't think that affects Purdue's seeding as much when you go into the tournament as, I guess, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, but it's a win-win, right? Because you're building momentum as the team, as in that non-conference portion of the schedule, and then you're also not really incurring any. I don't think Iowa State's going to get knocked big time for losing to Auburn this year. That's what I'm saying. If Purdue were to lose to Iowa State, or Iowa State were to lose to Purdue in this non-conference portion of the schedule, it's not the end of the world. right? Things will be okay. But you get a little bit of a, where are we at right now? Where are we at? Okay. And I think that's great. I think that's a great thing for these teams to get to deal with. That being said, where are the Cyclones at right now? And what's more important, a dagger or a hammer? We'll break down what those two things are and which one is more important to Otzelberger and to you and I. Coming up right after this. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, we got to break down hammers and daggers here at Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. What is this lingo? What are we doing here? Okay, I've got questions. You've got answers. I think that's backwards. Oh, actually, what if you did have the answers? That'd be kind of cool. Throw them down in the comments if you already know before I say it. Now, daggers and hammers are essentially vocab terms that TJ Otzelberger's kind of been throwing around. He threw around the hammer, and people kind of caught on pretty quickly. So a hammer is essentially a putback, rebound, quick put up, back up onto the boards or, into the rim, whatever, swish, basically a layup, essentially, right? Let's just say hypothetically, you've got Milan Momcilovic outside. Actually, let's not go with Milan because Milan, we want really to be that dagger guy. Let's go with maybe Joshua Jefferson. For some reason, out on the perimeter, we're going with a big package. We've got Chatfield, who is kind of known for this thing, and Jackson on the inside. Jefferson, feeling himself, shoots the three, okay? You've got Curtis Jones clapping, just going nuts. Momcilovic is like, oh, let's go. We're going to snag a three from Jefferson. Clanks off the rim. Chatfield's there. Rises above the competition, two hands on the ball, grabs it, brings it down. Doesn't necessarily have to bring it down, but in this case he does. Brings it down, jumps back up, does a little bit of a, too small, and then right in. Little layup action off the glass for this example, let's just say. Now that's a hammer, okay? The dagger is one that's been introduced a little bit more recently and is interesting. The hammer, a term that I have not heard of. Haven't heard of this, okay? Dagger, however, I'm sure you've heard of. I know I've heard of. A dagger is, up until this point, in my knowledge, a shot that is essentially the final blow, okay? Let's say Iowa State's up 4 with 30 seconds left. They're able to sneak the ball up the court, and they get a wide open three. Bang, that's 7, right? And then whatever the time is, it's a time and a score situation. It can happen really early, and depending, a couple minutes left, or generally a dagger is acknowledged when there's a couple possessions. A shot pushes it to a couple possessions with a couple seconds left, depending. Okay. This is not that. To my understanding, this dagger, introduced by Coach Otzelberger, is essentially the hammer, but instead of a putback close, bring it down right back up shot, it's a kick out. Maybe it's a long rebound, comes off the rim long, whipped out to an open three. Now, essentially the same concept, a quick basket right after a rebound. One's a 2, one's a 3. What are the pros and cons of these? Hammer, okay, your pro is that it's kind of demoralizing, okay? You're kind of imposing your will on the opponent, saying, hey, look at us. We grabbed this rebound. We put it right back in there. We were bigger than you on the inside. We did this job. Less by luck and more by just sheer will. Downside of this, it's only 2 points, but it's kind of automatic. That's another pro. Pros and cons of the the dagger. Okay. Pros, it's 3 points. It is. And in that same tune, it's a great look at 3. Okay, it's not a contested three. And TJ was asked about this, and he basically said, we got guys like Curtis and Milan who are coming up the floor, great three-point shooters, but the opponents are keying in on that. They're trying to stop that from happening. If we get a Keyshawn Gilbert drive, rebound a little bit long from a Jefferson who's crashing from the elbow, he grabs it, whips it out to Milan in the corner. They're all crashing from the rebound and or the drive from Keyshawn already. That leaves a Milan or a Curtis or whatever the case might be to be a bit more open and have a wide open shot. Well, an open shot, more than normal. Okay. Now, obviously, the downside to this, a little bit less will imposing, a little bit more luck based, and obviously you have to make the three. Now, when TJ was asked about this, which one would he rather have? He said, I don't think we really have one we want more than the other, right? You'd rather have points than not. At the end of the day, this is a quote, being the mathematician that I am, love that because I'm on the same wavelength there. I'd rather take the three because it's more points. Now, before I get into my pick, and I'd like to know yours, comment down below. My pick is slightly predicated on the math that is interesting to me. Going 1 of 3 from 3 is more beneficial than going 1 of 2 from 2. Now, what does that mean in a different wordage? 33% from 3, better than 50% from 2. Kind of, given the same amount of makes. A little bit of math here, there. It's just because 3s are worth more than 2s. The math does it, okay? The math is mathing there. That being said, what would I rather have? I would rather have the 3. I would rather have the dagger. If you could guarantee the make either way, definitely the dagger. If you can't guarantee the make, but you can guarantee that it's going to the hot hand, I'd still rather take the dagger. Why? 1, 3s get the crowd roaring. If it's in Hilton, that is going. Everybody knows it, right? The shot takes longer to get to the hoop. It's a bigger thing, like the ball's kind of in the air more. There's a little bit more ball movement to get it outside. Everybody sees it. Everybody knows it. And you just got 3 points. You got more points than you would have if you would have got a little putback. The crowd gets into it. Now, home or away, obviously, is going to play a little bit of a role there. But if it's at home, give me the dagger. That everyone just goes nuts for that. That's basketball. Now, if it's on the road, I can see the argument for hammer, especially depending on where we're at, standings wise with rebounding. Are we out rebounding them significantly? If we're not out rebounding them significantly, is one putback going to really demoralize them? Depends on the team, I suppose. But if you're up by 20 rebounds, kind of similar to that Cincinnati game, you get another one on them. I mean, it's going to feel like think back to the Super Bowl long time ago in the sports world. I'm sure it didn't take very long for all the Chiefs players to feel how many times Patrick Mahomes had been hit. And it was like, man, we just can't stop this team at all. So that plays a role here because it's, like I said, that imposing of a will as opposed to, they got lucky. They made that 3. Unless the guy's like super hot. It's most of the time, they made a 3. We're fine. Let's bounce back. We can get our own, right? Jizzle James and Taman Lipsy kind of back and forth type situation. There's pros, there's cons to each. Honestly, if I had to pick, like I said, I'm going dagger because you get more points. It feels more like, if it goes well, and, realistically, crowd, which Cyclones travel well. So even on the road, it's there. But that's not to say that the hammer is not a real thing. And the other thing that I will say really quickly, TJ mentioned that the hammer, especially for Chatfield, is very big for this team because this team doesn't rely on Chatfield to score. This team doesn't draw up plays necessarily for Brandon Chatfield. So when he goes out there and gets 2 hammers, that's 4 points. Unexpected. Maybe you're fouled. Get 2 extra free throw attempts. That's 6, right? The team fires up a little bit more for a Brandon Chatfield getting a hammer than for a Curtis or a Milan 3. And I could see that 100%. I know exactly where he's coming from with that. So for this team too, that's going to play a role. Depends on who's getting the hammer, right? At the end of the day. So let me know what you think. I'm going dagger just because maybe I'm new age. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But TJ seems to be kind of in that boat of let's just score. Let's just whatever happens. Okay. Let's just put the ball in the hoop. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Score more points. at the end of the day, scoring more points against Colorado is what this team is going to try to do tonight. We'll talk about that more coming up right after this. Iowa State will be taking on Colorado tonight in an absolute showdown in Hilton Coliseum at 7 p.m. Can't wait. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Iowa State looking to complete the sweep. Okay, playing Colorado for the third time this season. First time at the Maui Invitational. A pretty dominant win there, scoring 99 to Colorado 71. Then they go on the road to Boulder. First game of conference play. And they get that one 79-69, 10-point win. People were slightly concerned about that. Glad we got that win. And now here we are facing Colorado for the third time. What could happen here? Well, one of two things. Iowa State wins, Colorado wins. Those are really the two final outcomes that really could come of this game. Glad we got that out of the way. Let's talk a little bit about Colorado here. They are currently 1-13 in the conference. Yeah, tough. They go into conference play with 2 losses. 1-2 in Iowa State, obviously, and 1-2 in Michigan State, both at the Maui Invitational. So this team feeling pretty solid, I would have to imagine. You go into conference play 9-2, and now you find yourself in a much worse spot at 10-15, 1-13 in the conference. Now, the last time they won was Saturday. All right. Is that Valentine's Day? That's the day after Valentine's Day, February 15th. So maybe they were feeling the love of the air. They defeat UCF. Okay. I was curious because it is UCF and Iowa State swept them as well. Where does this put Colorado in points scored on the season or points allowed? Points scored, they are third from last in the conference at 70.4 points per game. A little bit of reference, Iowa State averages 81.4. So about 11 more points per game on average. Now there's outliers, right? Iowa State against UCF in the first game that they played 108 points, going to boost that total up. Okay, now when they score 52, I think it was against Kansas State, that's going to drag the overall down. Okay, there's two sides to that. So how did they do defensively? Still kind of in that same spot, fourth from the bottom now, allowing 71.6 points per game to Iowa State's average of 67. So that seems to be Iowa State has a bit of an advantage here. And we obviously know that they have played Colorado well in the past. Milan played in both of these games. Milan very notable in the first one and didn't score as many points the second time around. But that doesn't mean that that's what, remember when at that point in the season, we were talking about Iowa State can beat you this way, that way, up, down, left, right, center. You pick it. They can get you. So that's not necessarily where I want to draw that picture. Okay, that's just kind of who Iowa State has been. The momentum thing is one thing that I would like to point out because we've talked about, obviously Iowa State facing Kansas State, who was kind of heating up and honestly might be just like ridiculously hot. And we'll talk about that going into, obviously they're the last game of the regular season, but potentially in the tournament as well. How that looks, who knows? Kansas State, solid team right now. But then you've got like a UCF or a Cincinnati in this window that we're in right now of the season. These teams coming into Hilton and looking to extend their streak. Cincinnati, obviously the most notable one, most recent, and it felt like they really could have done some damage. They were unable to. 81-70 final score. We've talked about this. Colorado, their only win of the season. Obviously, you don't want them to get a streak going because what's it for? How much does that matter? I don't know. I'm not locked on Buffs. Go look at them. Great show. Shout out. I think it's Kevin Borba. Sorry, I'm just getting fired up because I'm thinking about this is a momentum game, 100%. And we've been saying that over and over for this team. This team is looking to gain momentum through this 4-game stretch. They did it with TCU. They did it with UCF. They did it with Cincinnati. Now it's Colorado. And then a couple days from now, we'll be talking about Houston. Okay. And that's a huge, huge, huge game for these Cyclones. And I don't want to put too much emphasis on it, even though I did just say huge 3 times. It is, though. And this game, admittedly, not. Unless we lose. And that would be a huge deal. I mean, I don't want to get dramatic here, but losing to Colorado after it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. I will admit that. Okay. But Colorado, I mean, we just talked about the statistics, 13 straight losses in conference. I mean, it's not looking great. It's really not looking great for Colorado. I think ESPN has it's 95% Iowa State, which makes me nervous too. It makes me nervous because it's just a bad look. You end up in the Big 12 conference will wheel out great competition repeatedly. Colorado's going to come in looking for blood. Let's get 2 wins in a row here. Everybody counts us out. Everybody's seen the last 2 games against Iowa State. Everybody knows that Iowa State's the better team. Oh, top 10 for how many weeks? We're going to Ames. This, that, and the other thing. They're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder if they're not defeated, I suppose. They're going to be looking to get that second win. They felt the win energy after UCF. And they're like, let's just keep it going. Let's take down number 8 Iowa State. I'm just saying you got to look out for that kind of stuff. You just do. And so offensively, where will Iowa State be? Hopefully we still see that Taman attacking the 3. We still see Milan Momcilovic kind of putting up some points. Keyshawn being that true Kyrie we've talked about over and over. Well, I guess we haven't talked about it too many times, but I was kind of the first one to coin that. I just want to throw that out there. Not trying to take credit, but I have seen a lot more Kyrie stuff after I said that immediately. How was that not everyone's first thought? I'm not even like dissing them for stealing my idea. I'm just like, how was everyone not immediately? I haven't seen a ball move like that since Kyrie was like, that was immediately my correlation. Either way, I hope to see that from this team. We got to see tons of hammers from Brandon Chatfield, and we got to see a lot of daggers. That's what it's going to come down to. And what is the predicate, like the source of both a hammer and a dagger? Rebounds. Let's drill down on those. And what am I, a coach? What am I doing here? What am I? Obviously, you're the one that's going to be watching the game just along with me. I'm not telling this to Milan Momcilovic. However, if you are watching Milan, shout out to you guys, everyone on that team. But my point being here, this team knows how to win. This team knows how to go about their business. TJ Otzelberger knows how to get these guys fired up. So I'm not too worried at the end of the day. I do think that this team it will handle this game. To say that I'm nervous about this game is not true. It just wouldn't be true. But I am certainly got the ears perked, right? We need to win. Let's just win the rest of the year. I don't understand what this is like. Is this a must-win game? What happens if you lose it? I don't want to play those games. Let's just win every single game. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. That being said, if you're still watching, shout out to you. You are the best. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? It's free. We're proving it's a Cyclone state here. Until next time, Cyclone fans, hammer or dagger? Let me know. Sayonara.